I'm here with Robert Peck, and Robert Peck lives out on a farm just on the outskirts of Marrickville, Ontario, which is not too far from Ottawa. And Robert and I have known each other for a number of years. We were in the Navy together, and it was nice to meet him here, and he's now retired from the Navy, and he's building his dream model railroad. It's quite an involved process, and so I thought I'd introduce you and let Robert tell us a little bit about it. How are you doing today, Robert?
Excellent. I'm glad to be here. So I'm modeling Canadian National and Canadian Pacific in the 1950s on Vancouver Island. What you can see here is the first bit of benchwork going up in a purpose-built room that we made specifically to build the railroad. So the room is an L-shaped 36 by 24. The 24-foot length has a 12-foot width, and a 36-foot length has a 16-foot width.
So that's a good size. It should allow for quite a bit of modeling.
My interest in CN and CP on Vancouver Island, I lived out there for 10 years, was a member of the Sauk River Railway, owned 3 miles of the Canadian National Main Line on Vancouver Island that ran along the Sauk River.
Yeah.
And we ran hand cars and Fairmont inspection cars and stuff like that up and down, and we had 2 fairly big bridges, both of which I'm hoping to get on the railroad. Anyway, I started planning for the railway using aerial photos from the National Aerial Photo Library in Ottawa. And they have quite a few good runs of Victoria, and one in particular was taken on July 4th, 1950 at 9:30 a.m. And those are the photos I'm using to do the track planning to do downtown Victoria, where both CN and CP had a yard and had a big interchange. CN had a big car ferry slip, and CP had its main distribution tracks, team tracks, and freight yard. So I'll show you a little bit about how that was put together. So I scanned the aerial photos into my computer, and blew them up, and on a large format printer was able to print out various pieces. So as an example, here's a piece showing the downtown street trackage that CP had. And to orientate yourself, this is the railway bridge, which is a bascule lift bridge that comes across the inner harbor. Downtown Victoria is down here towards the south, and inner harbor, the inner Selkirk Waters is up here to the north. The CPR trackage comes in across the bridge from the yard, and you can see here the CPR station, or the ENN station. It says ENN Railway right on the roof of the station. Yep. And the time period, this is about 9:30 in the morning, and the CP's passenger train is getting ready to head up island. So here's the locomotive, one of the 11 DSR 441,000s that CP bought from Baldwin, which they dieselized all the service on the island in 1948. Followed by a boxcar with express, probably carrying milk cans, and you can see a truck loading and unloading there. Then there's an RPO car and 2 baggage cars. Cars parked waiting with passengers to board the train, and then there's 2 coaches sitting here, uncoupled from the rest of the train because it won't fit across the bridge all coupled together. To orient people now, leaving Victoria, where would the trains be going? Train is going here and going up the island from Victoria. Okay, to what sort of points? Yeah, it goes up across the Malahat, through Niagara Canyon, and up to Duncan, and Ladysmith, Nanaimo, and eventually all the way to Courtenay. And how far are you going to model to? Probably going to model as far as Ladysmith. Okay. Because there was a fairly significant junction there with the logging railways, and there was a interlocking tower and signals there, which were about the only signals on the island. So it's kind of nice you'll be able to get some of that country scenery with the mountains and the Malahat. Yeah, that's the plan. Okay. So the CPR street trackage then extends beyond the passenger train here and runs up Store Street. All the way the length of Store Street, all the way here. There's a tank car sitting here. There was a power generating station at this end. Right. This little yard here is CP's Albion Yard, and this was the main set of team tracks. CPR's main freight shed was here, and trackage actually went in a pinwheel all the way down and served a cold storage fruit and vegetable warehouse at this location. So
Right.
very, very sharply curved track here. There are 50 cars in this chunk of track. So it was very busy, and you can see that some of the spurs are actually blocked by cars that are parked. So it's about as full as you could possibly get.
Yep.
There are other businesses on the trackage. So there's a little crossing right here as a switch comes across and feeds Kelly Douglas. They're the people who make Nabob coffee. So they have their warehouse here, and there's a refrigerator car and a box car sitting here being unloaded. At that time there was Odell's Movers, and they're here, this curved trackage against their building with cars being loaded and unloaded here.
That'll make for a very interesting structure with the curved siding.
Exactly. Then there's another switch going this way. It's the only reverse switch in the bunch, and it goes across here. And this is Swiss Canada meat packing plant.
Mm-hmm. In order to get into there, is there a spot where they can run around?
There is no run around here.
Oh, okay. So they have to design that all back in the main yard
Yeah.
then?
So all the switches generally are facing points, so the locomotive pushes all the cars down here. This one here, he has to make sure he's got the car behind him so he can get in and out.
Right.
There's another couple of cars parked here, and there's a set of meat rails in here, and underneath the tag is Burns Packing Plant, so another meat packing place. So if we go across the bridge, okay, so here's the bridge going up Island, having left Store Street, and you come across and you hit CPR's or E&N's main yard and roundhouse, turntable, car shops, passenger car storage, and then various trains, a little caboose sitting here. So this yard is an area that I want to model.
Now, when you mention the E&N, for folks that don't know what that is, that's the Esquimalt and Nanaimo?
Right, so that was a division on Vancouver Island that CPR purchased and ran as a separate division. What's neat about it is that it was the first division to be totally dieselized by CPR. It's because it was isolated on the island.
Yeah.
CPR took the opportunity to buy diesels in 1948 and dieselized the whole island, which is interesting for me because while CP was dieselized as early as 48, CN stayed steam until 58. So there's a 10-year period there where I can run diesels on CP and steam on CN, which is what the plan is. Speaking of CN, this switch here marks the location of the interchange track between CN and CP. So this is CP's set of team tracks with a cold storage building here, and this is the interchange track and a little interchange yard right here between CN and CP. A bit of the CP, I'm going to model the turntable and roundhouse. I'm going to model this this yard with its cold storage building, and I'm going to model the main line of CN coming in this way.
Okay, so let's have a look at that now then. This is the CN part now.
Yeah, so this is well, I've turned it 90 degrees, but this is the same cars that were sitting on the interchange track. Yeah, and it comes. This is the CN main line now, coming this way through CN's Point Ellis yard, and then out across Selkirk Waters Trestle. So there's CN's roundhouse, and you can see here in 1950 there's a steam locomotive sitting in front of here, probably something like a 460. Note there's no turntable, so it's just switches. That's the water tank there. This is the oil tank that provided bunker C for running the steam engines at that time. This is the CN station here with tracks, and these are CN team tracks here. And an unusual feature of the island at this time is all these empty 36-foot boxcars with the roofs taken off. They were used to haul cordwood and slab wood from the various mills on Vancouver Island, and was used as slab wood was used as home heating fuel here. On these aerial photos, there's a total of over 50 of these 36-foot boxcars with roofs off being loaded or being unloaded here. And this is in July, so this is the home heating fuel for the next winter being unloaded and delivered. Yeah, this is the car ferry slip here. You can see the idler cars there. There's actually a car float tied up beside, and the ferry would actually sit in this piece here.
Okay.
And
that was a ferry itself, or did it have a tug and tow type of thing?
well, this would be a barge, a rail barge, and it would have a tug that would tow it.
Right.
And there was also a self-propelled car ferry, the SS Kenora, that did the trip from Vancouver.
Yeah, are you planning to model that as well?
Yes, I am.
Excellent.
So those pieces are on. And I'll show you how I did the planning for the railway from these aerial photos. I overlaid them with a grid for 1 foot for HO scale and highlighted the tracks. And then I took those and I cut them out and I placed them into my train room where I thought they would go. So here's CP's Albion Yard,
right,
and that's the aerial photo piece cut out, and the various pieces going up store track. So there's Odell's Movers, there's Kelly Douglas, there's Swift's, there's Burns Meatpacking Spur, there's the E&N station. And I've taken some of the turns out to make it fit, and then put in the bridge going across the inner harbor, the interchange tracks for CN and CP, the CP's yard with the roundhouse and turntable, car shops, and then I bring from the CP interchange, I brought the tracks underneath CN, and I've taken them to the CN yard. Unfortunately, I can't stand in the water here and have the orientation correctly, so I flipped the yard over, and it's a reverse of the way it was. So the trackage, instead of going out this way, actually comes around and goes this way.
Okay.
And the track will eventually come up. The rest of the island will be up in the rest of the layout space.
Well, you've done two things really. I think that's pretty interesting here. One is you've taken obviously the reality of the world, which bends around the city as it exists, and unfolded it and created it so it was along the wall of your railroad room. And the second thing is, because of the nature of the CN yard, you flipped it in order to make it fit in, but yet operationally it all follows the same principles.
I don't think too many people know the CN yard as well as the CP, so I had to keep the CP pretty accurate so it would work. Now this drawing here just shows a scaled drawing that I did using Extract CAD software to determine that what I was doing was actually going to fit.
Sure.
So this is the Albion Yard with the software. Again, the siding's put in, the E&N station goes here, CP's yard here, and CN's yard here, and this is the car ferry slip here as an example.
Okay, so when you're talking about this program, then it's to fit for your particular turnouts that you're going to be using and the type of track, or?
Yeah, so I'm using Shinohara Code 70 and Code 83 track, which I'm converting to make DCC friendly.
Sure.
So that's what's on here. Now, those turnouts have quite a bit of extra straight track, and in some cases I'll make them a little smaller, but this is relatively conservative because this fits on this paper. It means I know that I can make it fit on the benchwork that I'm putting together.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to make sure that I had benchwork that would fit in the room, and made sure that my reaches weren't too long, and that I had access and that kind of stuff. Making sure that I keep the aisles to the 3 foot kind of width that I want, so there's lots of room to get around. Mm-hmm. So this gives you an idea of the railroad as I've been developing it in Extract CAD, and while it looks pretty complicated, this shows the railway as it's being benchwork that's being built around the outside of the railroad route now. So Albion Yard at the top here, the CPER in E&N station here, bridge across the harbor here, the interchange yard, CP's roundhouse and turntable, coach yard, and then CN's roundhouse and the car ferry slips here. And then the trackage will come here. Now, at the moment, it's going to end in staging going around this corner, but eventually CN will have a Y in this location. This is where it actually turns the engines around, and because it doesn't have the turntable. And the two railroads will then parallel each other and work their way up and over the Malahat, climbing in height, with CP eventually getting up here at almost 30 inches above the current benchwork and allowing you to walk underneath the Niagara Canyon Cantilever Bridge, which is going to go across in this location, and then interchange up here, probably with at Ladysmith, somewhere in this direction. The CN trackage will come in through Deerholm, which is this Y, and work around this peninsula and end up here in Yubo. And there's a little Y at Yubo to connect, and the back side of the Y will connect to staging that runs all the way back to the other end of this Y. So yeah, it's pretty ambitious, lots of trackage going on in the middle here. And this area here represents a logging railway with switchbacks that are climbing up from the lower edge of the benchwork and climbing the 30-inch elevation, working on switchbacks. Trackage goes into the back of the passenger station, and then this is it here. So there's the E&N railway station there with the main track.
And on the left is that meat packer's place?
Well, this is actually a hotel,
yeah.
But yes, this is a meat box car, and there's meat rails on here, and they went through the back of what used to be the hotel,
right,
and into the meat packing plant, which is a couple buildings down.
I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around this, and you're saying that they actually transported things from the railroad along to the meat packing plant, which was down the street?
Yeah.
And that was done how? Did I see a platform there?
Yeah, so there's meat rails
yeah.
at the top here, so they can connect to the rails inside the refrigerator cars that come, and then they would roll them out along the rails, and there's a little shed and stuff that goes along the back here that keeps it all covered once it gets outside the car.
So it runs along the rail all the way down to the meat packing plant, so they had some sort of access along there in the back of the property.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. Now, this bridge looks like it's something you can model using a Walther's kit.
Yeah, exactly. And so, in fact, I'm going to need two.
Yeah.
So one to do the railway track, and then one widened to do the roadway. So both bridges were side by side here.
Can we see that where you have it on the railroad?
So,
here?
so
you
I've
have
got
it just
it
over
here.
Yeah.
So here's the first Walther's bridge going in, and this is the space where the harbor's going to be, and just looking at trying to get the placing correct as to where it needs to be.
Well, that's kind of neat. So in that photo that we were just showing here, then it comes across here, and the passenger station is right here.
Yeah, it's right here. Here's the footprint here.
Okay, and then over to your left is where that meat packing place is. There.
Yeah, so it's going to be in here. You can see the diamond and switches are down here for the two industries that run off, and then Albion Yard down at the far end there.
Sure. One of the things I noticed here, which people might be interested in, is I see your Benchwork.
I really like the steel framing because it's light, it's easy to use, and it doesn't make very much mess. And you don't have to be super accurate cutting like you would with wood framework. You can get close, and then you can get the pieces lined up accurately and screw them together. And as you put more screws and put more pieces in, the benchwork gets stronger and stronger. I've used plywood top here because this is all going to be essentially street trackage and fairly level. My goal here was to try and get the benchwork as thin as possible while still being able to span the distance here that I wanted, so that I could put my workbenches and shelving and work areas underneath it. It's a C-channel.
C-channel, okay.
Okay, it's C-channel, and the bracing across, so it's a standard house framing steel.
Okay.
Steel framing.
Gotcha. So it also seems, because I guess it keeps the weight down as well, that you don't need too much to support it.
It's quite light.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot lighter than wood framing is. You don't need as many cross pieces of support, so you can have a look underneath here and just see what's here. So you can see there's cross pieces here.
Yep.
But the framing is pretty straightforward.
And you drilled holes for your wiring to go through, or is that the way it's channeled?
That's the standard framing. These are the studs, and these are the sills on the ends.
So are you going to drill through, though, to pass your wires, or?
I will. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If they're not already in.
Ah, okay. Super. And then that piece just frames down and connects to the wall.
Yeah, so this is just a leg to support it. So this piece of benchwork is probably got about 12 feet long. It's only got 3 supports on it. So there's just at the end, it's sitting on top of the filing cabinet. There's a diagonal here, and there's a small piece down at that end, and that gives, you know, super strong benchwork. It certainly would be good enough for all the weight that I'm going to put on it.
Now, one of the other factors, I guess, that comes into play was your decision to model this was based on a more realistic approach to having everything fit within a model railroad room.
Yeah, one of the things that, so I've been modeling a long time. I was living in Halifax for quite a while. We were modeling Canadian National in Halifax in the 1990s. And the trains there were huge. They were long, and it was hard to do an accurate representation of them at the club with you know, the size of the equipment. I knew that the equipment here would all be pretty small, and you can see from the aerial photos that, you know, 40-foot boxcars rule. There are no locomotives in CN. The biggest locomotive is a 280. On CP, the biggest locomotive is the DSR 441,000.
So you have one over here, do you?
Yeah, there's one here just out of the box.
Okay.
Not done up yet.
Yeah.
So to give you an idea of, you know, this is the biggest power that would have been on the island, are these 2 locomotives, the diesel and the steam engine behind it.
And they were used both, I guess, for the passenger and freight, and they probably had some variations depending on what type.
Yeah, the first 4, I think, of the diesels, 8,000 to 8,000, and 4 were built with steam generators and a short hood, and then the rest of the units delivered didn't have the steam generator, and they had the fuel tank put in the short hood. Yeah, that's a Stewart.
Okay.
And that particular one has the Cato drive in it, so it's a really nice.
Now, I take it that's now sort of a Bowser company or something like that.
Bowser's just released this locomotive with the correct block, CPR block paint scheme and sound. So I'm going to pick up a couple of those when they come out.
Well, I guess that'll be nice. Yeah, and I understand too with the new Loc sound system, it's pretty realistic in terms of the way they thunder along.
They sound great.
So one of the things that always interests me about choices people make in their model railroads is obviously the era and the location, but also too to move trains around. Sometimes it's nice to have a look at the types of rolling stock and why those pieces of rolling stock were on the railroad.
Well, Vancouver Island is kind of unique in that during the early part of the 20th century, there were a lot of railroads on the island. I would have thought that it might have had the highest per capita amount of railroads in North America. In the time period that I'm modeling, lumber and wood products were the mainstay of both CN and CP on the island. So you would see all kinds of lumber traffic, whether it's logs moving from different lumber companies to various mills around the island. In fact, CN was bringing peeler logs down to the interchange in Victoria, switching them to the CPR, and CPR was taking those logs to a plywood mill in Esquimalt. So we'll see logs moving in just about any direction here on the railroad, depending on the type of trees that were being harvested, what they were going to be used for, which mill was buying them, and so on.
Historically, there was a lot of, I guess you could call them narrow gauge type steam that would be running up into the mountains, or maybe even standard gauge that had the Shea type locomotives and things like that.
So there were a lot of geared locomotives on the island, and the rest of the railroad, as it starts to climb up the Malahat and out of Victoria, will connect with a whole bunch of different logging railroads that will operate either Climax, Heisler, or Shea locomotives. These will, on my railroad, be all standard gauge, and most of the ones on the islands were. And those locomotives were operating on the island well into the 1960s in some cases, so they'll be appropriate to add to this. Coal mining was big on the island. It really started in the 1800s and was the impetus for the start of the ENN Railway early on. And coal mining was active on the island until 1960, and coal trains were being hauled by steam locomotives until that time. So I could model that as well. The plan right now is to get the switches in, and there's a lot of switches here right now. So building these 2 yards with all the industrial area, this is a significant installation of switches. And switching is the kind of work that I really like to do in operations. So switching the 2 yards, that's really the kind of thing I want to get going. So installing these switches is going to take quite a bit of time. I'm not seeing operating sessions for probably another year or so, being able to do that. But we'll start with that, and we'll put in staging at the end of the CN and CP yards so that we can run the trains in and out and operate the 2 yards and the industrial trackage on Store Street as an example, until we can get the rest of the island built, which is what's going to fill the rest of the space.
I know you're a bit of a person who really enjoys the history of railroads and the like. I was admiring the doors at the entrance to your railroad room.
Well, the doors came from Canadian Pacific's roundhouse in Smith Falls. They're the yard office doors, so
yes,
they were salvaged, and we managed to install them in the room, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, I think that's pretty nifty. Well, thanks very much, Robert, for having me by this afternoon to have a look at your railroad. It really shows that you've got a keen interest in the hobby, and that you've gone to a great extent to model in the prototype. And yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, you're very welcome. You have to come back again soon when we get more done.
I'm looking forward to it.